We live in an age of post-information scarcity. Now, I know there's a lot to unpack there, so let's define our terms first. When I say scarcity, I'm referring to the economic idea that physical commodities might have a limited or scarce supply. And so in a limited supply of, say, gold, the value of gold is tied to our ability to mine that gold and to the maximum quantity of gold that can exist. So as our supply of gold diminishes, as it becomes more scarce, the value of gold increases to maintain some sort of parity there. But it doesn't only apply to physical goods. Scarcity can also come in the form of our ability to produce or manufacture something. If we only have 10 employees making a widget and we can only make 5 widgets a year, then the cost of those widgets are going to be extremely high. But if suddenly there's a technological breakthrough that allows our 10 employees to create 500 widgets a year, our supply has become less scarce, and now we can decrease the cost to provide that widget to our consumers. So there's two sides to it: the limited carrying capacity of the commodity and our ability to produce that commodity at scale. Now for information, excuse me, the way I'm defining information is largely through the intellectual property lens. So things like music, things like information or knowledge, things like media or film or intellectual content that isn't necessarily tied to a physical device, that's how I'm using information. So when I say that we live in an age of post-scarcity, information post-scarcity, I mean that there's no longer a limiting factor of distribution, and there's no longer a limiting factor of creation. And so since we live in this post-scarcity age, I'm of the opinion that information should be free, right? As the supply and the ease of production of information has increased to the point of it no longer being scarce, that stands to reason that the price or the availability of that information would decrease to the point of being free. So the reason for that really comes in the form of the internet, right? The internet has democratized information. It has allowed creators to bypass traditional media gatekeepers, and it has allowed consumers to also bypass an intermediary publisher to access that content. So when I create something, I can give it directly to a consumer instead of having to pass it on through a publisher or a producer and then to the consumer. So it's direct, it's been democratized. And it's important, I think, when we're framing this conversation to realize what publishers do and what they contribute to the product. In traditional media, publishers would kind of function two ways. They would provide financial assistance to creators during the creative process, and then they would provide distribution for that material after the creative process has finished. Good example of this is authors, right? Authors might receive an initial investment, an initial amount of money to begin their book, to begin the writing process, and then once that writing process has finished, they usually get compensation in the form of royalties from the sales of those books. And so traditionally, publishers or producers faced a certain amount of liability when they were supporting content. Because if I'm a publisher and I'm sponsoring an author and that author's book doesn't sell, I'm kind of out of the money that I invested in that author to produce that content in the first place. But outside of that traditional publisher-creator relationship, in an age of information post-scarcity, in an age of the internet, there's not a lot of liability to be assumed by the publisher. The way publishers tend to work now is very much like how Netflix or Disney Plus or a lot of even journalistic publications like CNN or Huffington Post, and maybe most commonly or most applicably, YouTube. So instead of sponsoring me to create video, what these publishers do now is they provide a platform on which I can host my material And I'm banking on the fact that their reach will provide an incidental bump to my creative process in the form of views. So I'm paying through my time and my creative process to access their audience. And so there's no longer a financial support of me in that way, but I'm the one still assuming all the liability and all of the creative process. And so as a consumer, I think it's important to understand that relationship and realize that access to that information is already free to the publishers, so it should be free to the consumer as well. Now, there is a counter argument to this. The counter argument is, if we're just getting our content for free, how do we provide financial support to the content creators, right? You guys have artists that you might really like, musical artists that you might really like. And trying to find a way to give that artist some money can be challenging, because the way we've been conditioned to view that relationship is musician X puts their song up on Spotify, that song gets a certain amount of plays, and then Spotify pays out a percentage of those plays back to the artist. So in that kind of relationship, the way I'm supporting my favorite artists is very passively by just giving them my time or my attention through Spotify as the intermediary. But what has Spotify contributed to that creative process? All they've really done is skim off the top. When I'm on Spotify or when I'm on YouTube, I'm paying YouTube through the data I'm providing to them, and I'm paying YouTube through the time that I'm spending on their platform and being sold ads. And so say in a given dollar, or in a given amount of time, I give YouTube $1 worth of ad revenue. How much of that dollar is paid to the content creator that I'm supporting with my time? And we'll come to those figures a little bit later. But suffice it to say, instead of paying content creators through our time or through our views on a publishing website like YouTube or Spotify or Disney Plus, or even a service like Scribd for books, it's more beneficial to the artist to give that dollar directly to them in the form of buying their merchandise or buying their content directly from them. Now, this kind of bleeds into a larger conversation that I want to have surrounding the FOSS community, free and open source software. So we've been talking a lot about information in the form of specifically like entertainment and knowledge, textbooks, that sort of thing. But it also applies to computer software, which is why I'm a big fan of like Linux and GNU and this FOSS community that has kind of sprung up as a result of them. And it's important to iterate that free and open source doesn't mean free from financial support. It means free from restriction. It means free from the heavy hand of a publisher or a producer, right? It's free to the community to audit the code. It's free to the community to fork a project or to contribute code at the discretion of the person who holds the license. And I think that's an important thing to get behind, right? To understand that FOSS is free from restriction, as like our speech is free from restriction, and that all information should be similarly free from that restriction. There's nothing different at this point from contributing code to a large project or being able to access code for your own project from a larger project, just like accessing music from a larger body of work or accessing information bound in a textbook that is now available digitally online. So that's the argument, but let's talk a little bit about practical steps. So as a consumer, my real practical step that I would encourage you guys to start following is support people, not institutions, right? We want to find ways to give financial support to content creators without funneling through an intermediary. So like I was saying earlier, attend concerts, buy directly from websites. Maybe most importantly is participate in the community that the content creator is establishing, right? There's an engagement piece to all of this that's really at the heart of content creation, is creating an audience and creating a community. So if you really like the content someone is creating, participate in that community. That'll provide more support for that content creator than passively consuming their media on YouTube or Spotify. Also, limit your subscriptions to services, especially streaming services, and seek out free alternatives. So streaming services are kind of nefarious, right? We talked about YouTube a little bit, but services like Spotify or Google Music or YouTube or Apple Music or Disney Plus, all of those streaming services, they skim almost 100% of the profits off the top before they pay out content creators. So I've looked up some figures on this just so I had them right. Spotify pays about 0.00437 cents per listen. That's about a half a penny per listen, which means the other 99.5% of the profit they're making per listen is coming directly into their pocket, not the content creator's pocket. YouTube is about the same. YouTube videos make about 0.005 cents per view after you're monetized. So in order to get monetized, you have to have, I think, 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 watch hours, if I'm not mistaken. So after you've passed that threshold, now you're eligible to receive about half a penny per view on your video. The other 99.5% of the profit they're making off of your content is going directly into YouTube's pockets. In more traditional media, like print media, books, textbooks, authors make roughly 5% royalties off of their published book, which is, I mean, compared to YouTube or Spotify, a ton. 5% as opposed to 0.5%. But still, 95% of the revenue is going toward the publisher. And textbooks, these are things like college textbooks, high school textbooks. The authors of these actually get paid out the best from everything that I've looked at. They make roughly 12% for their publications. So good on them. But again, the other 88% is going to the publisher. And as we've established, in the age of information post-scarcity, the publisher really isn't assuming a whole lot of liability to host that content, but they are reaping 99.5% of the profit, especially for streaming services. And I guess it's worth it to say at this point too that the real nefarious thing about a lot of publishers too is, depending on the contract you're able to negotiate, you might not even retain, as the creator, you might not even retain ownership of your creation. I think this has kind of died away as we've moved toward more digital distribution models, but under traditional distribution models, in the music industry, for example, the publisher or the publishing house retains the ownership of the album or the song or the book that you've produced. And you can't even take that, what's your intellectual property, you can't even take that to another publisher to republish. It no longer belongs to you, it belongs to the copy house. And as we move away from that model, I think it's valuable as a content creator to retain ownership of your property, of your intellectual property. Now, that's from the consumer standpoint. If you're a creator, what I would recommend is, instead of focusing on finding a way to push your product through traditional media, is find ways to create community and drive community engagement. It's really important to retain ownership of your material. I would even argue it's important to provide your content for free financially, but turn a profit on selling an experience, right? I think contemporary audiences really want to be engaged with creator more authentically, more individually, more face-to-face, which is why you see things like Patreon exploding. It's a way to provide direct financial support to the people and get community engagement back from them. So it's no longer enough, I think, to just say, here's my book, or here's my newspaper, or here's my article, or here's my song, and then have someone passively consume it. I think it's more important now to say, here's my content, let's build something around it. And I think that's how you're going to drive financial support from the content you're creating, while distributing that information, distributing that content free of restriction for your audience. So I hope some of that is making sense to you guys. I hope it's giving you a little bit to think about. I really enjoy this stuff. Really enjoy talking about it. So thank you for hanging in there with me and letting me chew your ear a little bit. But I'll see you guys on the next video.